If kangaroos had no tails, they would topple over. Is this sentence true or is it false? Or maybe it's neither. There actually is a way to find out whether it is true or false. Let me explain how. For quite some time, philosophers thought that sentences of this type were meaningless because they refer to nothing. Kangaroos do have tails, so why speculate on what would happen if they didn't? But how can such statements be meaningless? We use similar expressions all the time if you think about it. Take this sentence. If I hadn't missed the bus, I would have been on time. Or, if I had been more handsome, I would be dating Lily James. Or, if I had been rich, I would have bought an Aston Martin. Would you really say that all these sentences lack meaning? No, I wouldn't say so. But if they are meaningful, they must have a truth value, right? They have to be able to be either false or true. Whenever we have a sentence and want to figure out whether it's true or not, there has to be something in the world that makes it true. In other words, we need clear truth conditions for any sentence. Take this one, for example. The cat's on the mat. What makes this sentence true is if and only if, in fact, the cat is on the mat. The state of affairs of the world make the sentence true or false. But what makes our first sentence then true or false? Since we're not really referring to anything, this sentence is in fact true according to David Lewis. What we're referring to is a possible world where kangaroos don't have tails. To figure out whether such a statement, also known as a counterfactual, is true or not, we only need to evaluate two different possible worlds. A world where kangaroos have no tails and they do topple over. And then B, a world where kangaroos have no tails and don't topple over. And then we simply need to ask ourselves the question, which one of these two worlds is closest or most similar to our world? Does it sound weird? Don't worry. Take a look at this figure. The @ symbol represents our world. Surrounding our world are other worlds, and the farther we go from @ the less similar the worlds are compared to our world. So let's say that here is a world that is identical to our world in all respects except that I, or my counterpart, hates cheese. An odd world indeed. But out here, we have worlds that have different laws of nature and where dragons fly upside down hunting hobbits. So when we compare worlds, we simply ask the question, what world is closest to our world? And obviously, the world where my counterpart hates cheese is closer than the world filled with hobbit hunting dragons. So, with all other things being identical with our world, A is more similar to our world than world B, since in our world the kangaroo uses its tails partly for balance, so if it loses its tail, it would topple over. Hence, our original sentence 1 is true, because the world in which kangaroos lack tails and topple over is closer to our actual world than the world where they don't. The world where kangaroos lack a tail but don't topple over exists according to David Lewis, but it is way farther from our world than the world where they do, because you would have to change something about our world to make the kangaroos not topple over. For instance, if kangaroos were equipped with and had the capacity to use crutches, but that is not true of our world. Hence, it is farther from our world. So whenever I have a counterfactual sentence like this, in other words, an if-then sentence where the antecedent is false, I need to ask myself the question, which world is the closest to our world? I know all this might sound odd, but I think it's very commonsensical actually. Let's go through some more simple examples. So if I say the sentence, if I hadn't missed the bus, I would have been on time. This sentence is simply true because the world where I catch the bus and made it on time is closer to our world. I didn't hear anything on the news that the bus exploded, so it did make it on time without me on it in this world. So then, if I had made it onto the bus, then I would have been on time. The world where the bus exploded is farther from our world. Hence, it is true. And this sentence, if I had been more handsome, I would be dating Lily James. This sentence is most likely false, since I don't think Lily James is that much into philosophers on YouTube, no matter how handsome they are. The world where Lily is strangely infatuated with philosophers and decided to date my more handsome counterpart is farther from our world compared to the world where my handsome counterpart doesn't. And then, if I had been rich, I would have bought an Aston Martin. That sentence is true, since in this world, I think that Aston Martin makes the coolest looking cars. So if I was rich, I would have certainly bought one. So through the postulation of possible worlds, we have clear truth conditions for counterfactuals. Here Lewis writes, under that idealization, we can say that a counterfactual conditional, if it were that A, then it would be that C is true if and only if C is true at the selected A world. More generally, the conditional is true at a world W if and only if C is true at the A world selected from the standpoint of W. A worlds here refers to all and only those worlds where the antecedent is true. In other words, these parts of all our sentences. And C refers to the consequent, i.e. the rest of each sentence. There's a lot of information there, but if you have any questions, please leave a comment down below and I'll do my best to answer all of them. This is a pretty tricky subject. But anyways, thank you so much for watching and I hope you learned something new. And if you want to know more about David Lewis and possible worlds, then I suggest you watching this video here.